האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov, good evening, Dober V'Yetcher. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parshas Yitro. We're going to do Os Yud, section number 10. And let's jump right into the text. Medrash Rabbah. The Medrash Rabbah comments on a pasuk from our Parsha, Parshas Yitro. Al pasuk on the pasuk, Ko Somar Leves Yaakov. So you should say to Beis Yaakov, to the house of Jacob. The Medrash comments, Elu Hanoshim. This part of the pasuk, this first part of the pasuk, when it says you should say to the house of Yaakov, that's referring to the women of the Jewish people. Visage livnei Yisrael. And then the pasuk continues and said, and you should tell it to the children of Israel. Elu ha'anoshim. These are the men. So the Medrash, which is going to continue in a moment, breaks up the pasuk and says, when Hashem said, thus you should say to Beis Yaakov, the house of Yaakov, that was Hashem's way of referring to the women, to the Jewish women. And Visage Livnei Yisrael, and you should tell it to Bnei Yisrael, and this pasuk refers specifically to the men. Then the Medrash continues, V'lama lanoshim techila. Why did the pasuk talk about the women first? Why did Hashem say to Moshe, so you should say to the women first before you tell the mitzvos to the men? Shehein mizdar zeros techila ba mitzvos, because they, the women, are the first to demonstrate alacrity when doing mitzvos. Not just are they committed to quickly doing mitzvos, but they're the first to quickly do mitzvos. So they come first in the pasuk. Ad kan Lashono, until here is a quote from the Medrash Rabbah. So the Zera Shimshon is going to ask a series, 5 questions, which really it depends on how you count them. It could be more than that, but the way we're going to set them up, it's 5 questions on this excerpt, this little innocuous-looking excerpt from the Medrash Rabbah, which again simply seems to say, does say that when the pasuk tells us that Hashem said, so you should speak, so you should say to Beis Yaakov, that's the women, and you should tell it to Bnei Yisrael, that's the men. And why were the women put first? Because they were the first to be fast, to be quick, to do mitzvos. Okay, let's start getting into the Zera Shimshon's questions. Next paragraph. Yesh ledaktek, we need to analyze. Mahu shehein mizdarzeros techila. What did it mean? What does it mean in the Medrash Rabbah when it says they were the first ones to be quick to do mitzvos? Now that's question 1 right there, so let's make sure we understand it. The Zera Shimshon is not asking, what does it mean they were quick to do mitzvos, that women are quick to do mitzvos? He's asking, what does it mean that they were first to be quick to do mitzvos? Where do we find that idea that men and women were somehow measured, and it was found that women were first to be quick about doing mitzvos, and somehow maybe men are quick and show alacrity when doing mitzvos, but women are first to show alacrity when doing mitzvos? Where does that idea come from? The Zera Shimshon asks. Ve'od, question number 2. Sha'adarabba, don't we see in Chazal in one place just the opposite? Noshim atzlonios hein. There's a place in Chazal where it suggests that women in certain areas are lazy. They show laziness. So why is the Medrash Rabbah saying that women are mentioned first here in the pasuk? Because they're first to show alacrity when doing mitzvos. What about that source that says they're slow and to do mitzvos? So that's question 2. Question 3. Da'afilu im tiyena yosers rizos. Even if we say that women demonstrate more alacrity and earlier quickness to do mitzvos, mikol makam, nevertheless, ein tam ze maspik lahakdimon. This should not be a sufficient reason to put them first in the pasuk? Why are women put first? Is it just because they do mitzvos with alacrity or more alacrity than the men, or earlier alacrity? That's not enough. Shaharei hanoshim einon b'chol hamitzvos ka'hanoshim. Zera Shimshon says women are not included in all of the mitzvos equal to men. So as we know, this is a reference to a famous fact from Jewish law that women are exempt in general from time-bound mitzvos. If you have a time-bound mitzvah, a woman is exempt. So women are not obligated in as many mitzvos as men are. Men are obligated to do more mitzvos than women are. And therefore, the Zera Shimshon says the fact that in the mitzvos that women are obligated to do, they demonstrate more alacrity, that shouldn't be enough to place them first when, after all, they're not even obligated in as many mitzvos as men are obligated in. They are exempt from a whole category of mitzvos. Again, in general, there are some exceptions to that rule where women are obligated even in time-bound mitzvos. But in general, that's a rule, and therefore, since they're generally obligated in less mitzvos, why did the Medrash Rabbah choose to focus so much on their alacrity in mitzvos when they're obligated in less mitzvos altogether? Ve'enon chayovos b'salmud Torah, and they're not obligated in the mitzvah of Torah study. And this pasuk is talking about Hashem telling Moshe to tell the people to receive the Torah, that they need to be ready to receive the Torah, to study the Torah and do the mitzvos. And women are not obligated in the mitzvah of Torah study. Now that issue, that point about women being exempt from the mitzvah of Torah study is going to play a major role in this piece. So let's pause for a moment. It is understood that a woman, of course, needs to learn about any mitzvos that she would be obligated to do, or that she's going to be involved in. So just as an obvious example, right? Women, of course, take precedence when it comes to the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles, as an example. So a woman cannot possibly think she's going to be able to do that correctly unless she learns the halachas of lighting the Shabbos candles and knowing how to do it correctly. And that applies to every other area of life and every other mitzvah that a woman is going to be obligated to do and involved in. Of course, she has to learn the Torah information necessary to do that mitzvah. But what's being talked about here is, in addition, above and beyond learning all of the things that a person needs to learn, in order to perform the mitzvos, there's a separate mitzvah of Talmud Torah, of study of Torah, separate and independent from what a person needs to do. So, for example, if a person nowadays, or since the destruction of the Second Temple, wants to study the entire sections of the Gemara that deal with, or the Torah for that matter, that deal, Torah Shebichsav and Torah Shebal Peh, that deal with the Beis Hamikdash and Korbanos, those are not things that we do today, and they haven't been done. They haven't been mitzvos that are applied to us for about 2,000 years. So there's still a mitzvah to study everything connected to those things. And that's the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, for example, that we're talking about, where you're studying Torah because it's a mitzvah to study Torah, even in a theoretical sense, even in a non-practical sense, even independent of the mitzvahs that a person is planning to do and needs to do and is required to do. That mitzvah of learning Torah in that sense, the Zera Shimshon says women are exempt from that. So why should they be put first in this pasuk where it's talking about study, or apparently talking about the study of Torah? Next question. Ubechol makom matzinu shaha'ish kodem leisha. In general, we find when men and women are mentioned in psukim together, the men are mentioned first. So why here is there an exception to that general assumption, a general rule, and why are the women mentioned first? If in general it'll talk about ish va'isha, a man and a woman, it'll talk about men first before it talks about women. V'chein b'perek testa brachos, and we find a similar idea about when men being mentioned first or going first in a very unusual Gemara in Masech, the 9th chapter of Masech the Brachos, where the Gemara says, Mistabra de zochar misage beresha. It would make sense to think that the man walked first. The Gemara over there is talking about the creation of Adam and Chava, and it brings in an opinion that Adam and Chava were originally created as one being, back to back, so that you had two faces. You had a man's face, a male face on one side of this creature, and you had a female's face on the other side of the creature, and they were back to back. You might almost picture in your mind a male and a female, like a case of Siamese twins, the two bodies next to each other, connected, of course, and this is one creature. And there's one opinion in the Gemara that that's how Adam and Chava were created, in which case, when Hashem did the surgery that's talked about in the creation of the world in Bereshis, it was separating these two forms from each other. It wasn't taking a part of Adam's body, a small part, and turning it into a woman. It was actually separating off from this dual creature and separating it into a man and a woman, or something similar to that, according to this opinion. So following that school of thought, the Gemara asks if that's how they were set up when they wanted to walk, when this creature wanted to walk somewhere, who led? Who would walk first? Would the woman side walk first, the female side walk, and the man side would be kind of tagging along? Or would the man walk and the female would be tagging along? So the Gemara says it makes sense that it would be the male side that would walk first, again, going along with this concept that men are mentioned first, and therefore the man would move ahead first. So that's a question here where the pasuk clearly puts the women first. The Ode, and another question. Shebekan hoya hakadosh baruch hu rotze litain Torah liYisrael kedei sheyilmedu osa. Here in this pasuk, it's specifically talking about Hashem's desire to give the Torah to the Jewish people in order that they should study it. V'acher kach yekaimu osa v'yishmeru mitzvos. And afterwards, they're going to fulfill the Torah and observe the mitzvos. V'hanoshim peturos mitalmud Torah. And once again, circling back to the idea mentioned above, women are exempt from the study of Torah that's not connected to the performance of mitzvos that they're obligated to do. And therefore, since this whole pasuk is dealing with Hashem wanting to give the Torah to the Jewish people so they can study it and observe it, shouldn't men be put first because they have the mitzvah to study Torah and do the mitzvos? Women have a modified kind of Torah study mitzvah along with the observance of mitzvos. So shouldn't men go first? So as we pointed out in the beginning, this is a series of questions trying to understand the statement by the Medrash Rabbah that when it says Kos Somar Leves Yaakov, it's talking about Hashem is talking about giving the Torah, speaking about the Torah and the mitzvos to women first, and then V'sagi Livnei Yisrael, and then telling it over to Bnei Yisrael, which refers to the men. So a series of questions as to why the women are put first here. Now let's continue in the next paragraph. V'yesh lomar, and we can say, the Amrina b'kedushin daf lamed dalet. Chazal say in Maseches Kedushin, page 34, Shahanoshim chayovos b'mezuzah misvara. The Gemara over there discusses whether a woman is obligated to put up a mezuzah on her home. And it says, yes, misvara. We have a logical reason why it makes sense to say a woman, let's say, who lives in her own home, purchases and lives in her own home. So there's no issue of a man putting up a mezuzah. This is her house, and is she going to obligated to put up a mezuzah? So the Gemara says, yes, it makes sense to say so. Why? The gavru bo'u chaye Noshe lo ba'u chaye. So the Gemara says, because it's only reasonable if men need to be blessed with a long life, that women also need to be blessed with long life. Both men and women desire and hope to have the bracha, aspire to have the blessing from Hashem for long life. And that's why it makes sense for a woman to be obligated in putting up a mezuzah. What does long life have to do with mezuzah? Well, it says in the Torah, when the Torah talks about putting up the mitzvah to affix a mezuzah on the doorposts of your house, the Torah says that a person who does so will be blessed with long life. And so the Gemara says, just like a man desires the blessing of long life and hopes to receive it, and is obligated to put up a mezuzah, it only makes sense to say so too. Women should put up a mezuzah in order to attain, hopefully, the blessing of long life that's attached to the mitzvah of putting up a mezuzah. So that's what the Gemara calls a svara. It's not from a pasuk. The Gemara didn't feel there was an actual quote from the Torah that makes it clear that women have an obligation to put up a mezuzah, but it felt like it was sensible, reasonable to say so. Vehikshu sham hatosvos. So on that Gemara, Tosfos, the commentary of Tosfos, asks a question. And we have another pasuk that says, Ki hu chayecha v'orech yamecha. It is your life and the length of your days. So that pasuk, we're going to see that it's a little bit unclear, but the assumption that Tosfos is making to start off with, and the general assumption made about that pasuk, is it's talking about Torah study. Ki hu chayecha. Torah study, assuming that that's what it's referring to, is your life and the length of your days. So Tosfos says, "Demashma isha nami chayeves betalmud Torah." That would imply, since that pasuk apparently seems to say that study of Torah brings a person the blessing of long life, that would mean that women are also obligated in Torah study. Again, we're talking about the theoretical Torah study, not directly connected to mitzvos that a person is required to perform. Tosfos says a woman should hypothetically also be obligated in that type of Torah study. Mehai taima, from the same reason, the gavre boi chaye v'chule, that the Gemara brought regarding the mitzvah of mezuzah. Just like putting up a mezuzah can bring a man the blessing of long life, so too a woman is obligated to mezuzah so she can get the blessing of long life. Tosfos says, but wait a minute, then that should apply to a woman when it comes to the mitzvah of Torah study, because this pasuk, hu chayecha v'orech yamecha, seems to say Torah study brings long life, so a woman should be obligated. But that's a problem, because Tosfos knows and expects us to know that a woman actually is exempt from the mitzvah of Torah study, from the obligation of Torah study that is not connected to the mitzvos that they perform. So Tosfos is going to give two answers to that question. Yesh lomar, we can say, this is Tosfos' first answer, Dikro lo koi atalmud Torah, that pasuk of kihu chayecha v'orech yamecha, it is your life and the length of your days, is actually not referring to the mitzvah of Torah study. Ella akiyum mitzvos, ha-mitzvos. Rather, it's referring to the fulfillment of mitzvos. And the pasuk is saying when a person fulfills Hashem's mitzvos, that is what brings them life and a lengthening of their days. And that certainly applies to men and women. Men and women both have obligations to do mitzvos and fulfill the mitzvos. So according to Tosfos' first answer, it's simply a matter of going back to that pasuk in the Torah and looking carefully enough at it to see, according to this first answer, that it's really referring to the observance of mitzvos, and that's what brings a person long life. And it's not directly referring to Torah study. That's Tosfos' answer number one. Ve'o yesh lomar, the commentary of Tosfos says, and we could also propose the second answer, top of the next column. De'in hachinami dehai kro koi v'chule. we could concede that the pasuk, in fact, is referring, as we thought originally, to the mitzvah of Torah study. We could say that. Mihu ein svara lomar din nechayvu noshim b'talmud Torah. Nonetheless, even though it talks about long life, the long blessing of long life that comes from Torah study, it would not make sense, according to the second approach, to say that women are obligated to deduce, therefore women are obligated to study Torah, mishum svara digavre bo chaye, because of the logical reason of women, of men want and need long life, v'chule, etc. And so to women, Kevan de ashkechon meute galbaihu, because we find an exclusionary verse regarding women in the study of Torah, v'hodatom levanecha. The Torah says you should make the mitzvos known to your sons, and the Gemara has a drasha, v'lo livnosecha, and not to your daughters. So the fact that the Torah says, and you should teach Torah basically to your sons, and it doesn't say you should teach Torah to your sons and your daughters, Tosfos says that is a miuta. That excludes women from the mitzvah, from being included in the mitzvah of Torah study, and therefore we wouldn't include them because of that. Aval mezuzah deleka miuta klal. But when the Gemara discussed the mitzvah of mezuzah, where there's no exclusionary words or phrases at all to say women shouldn't be included, yesh svara lomar, then it was reasonable to say that women would be obligated in the mitzvah of mezuzah misvara de gavre bo chaye, from the logical reasoning that the Gemara utilized, just like men want to be blessed with a long life and therefore they're obligated to put up a mezuzah, so too women are included in the mitzvah of putting up a mezuzah to get the blessing of long life. Ad kan lashono, until here is a quote from Tosfos. So Zera Shimshon does a little bit of a deep dive into this issue of whether or not women are not really whether or not women are obligated to study Torah, but whether or not women, whether or not the pasuk about chayecha v'orech yamecha, your life and the length of your days, applies primarily to performance of mitzvos, or whether we can say it applies to performance of mitzvos along with Torah study. But even if we take that second approach, that it applies to the pasuk is talking about Torah study as well as perform kiyum mitzvos, performance of mitzvos, since we don't then turn around and include women in the obligation to study Torah, because we have this miuta, we have this exclusionary verse in which we learn that they're not obligated. A man is not obligated to teach his daughters Torah, which is then drawn out to say a woman is not obligated to study Torah, again, in the sense that we've described before. Next paragraph, Vehanafkamina, and there is a practical difference between sheyesh bein shnei haterutzim, between these two answers, these two approaches in Tosfos. Hainu, and this is what it is: Talmud Gadol, Maseh Gadol. Is the study of Torah greater, or is the performance of mitzvos greater? Zera Shimshon says that issue as to which one is greater, and of course this is a what we call a sugya. This is a great discussion in the Gemara and Shas. Which one is greater, the study of Torah or the performance of mitzvot? So Zera Shimshon suggests that whole question is what's driving the two different answers in Tosfos. Let's see how he explains that. Shilafi Terutz Harishon, according to the first answer in Tosfos, Maaseh Gadol. We can see that first answer, the approach of the first answer was that doing mitzvos, observing mitzvos, is greater than the study of Torah. Dimukminon kra, because according to the first answer, we established the pasuk dechihu chayecha that said it is your life al kiyum ha-mitzvos dafka. Specifically, about the observance of mitzvos and not Torah study. That was the whole point, the whole thrust of the first answer in Tosfos was to say, don't think that pasuk about lengthening your days and giving you long life was talking about Torah study. No, it was talking about the observance of mitzvos. So according to that approach, observance of mitzvos, which brings you long life and the lengthening of your days, is clearly greater than Torah study. Omnam, however, lefi teirot sheni, according to the second answer in Tosfos, dimokminon le kipshate al Talmud Torah, that we established the pasuk about lengthening your days and giving you long life to refer to the study of Torah, meaning the study of Torah in addition to observance of mitzvos, im kain Talmud Gadol. If so, then study is greater than observance of mitzvos, and that's how we understand the pasuk according to the second approach, second answer in Tosfos. Upluktihi b'Baba Kama, and this is an argument in the Gemara in Baba Kama. V'koshe, and then we have a problem. The amai nodu Tosfos miteres harishon. Why did Tosfos depart from just giving the first answer and give us a second answer? We include in the Gemara in Baba Kama that performance of mitzvos are greater than Talmud Torah. So we need to pause for a moment to understand this question. Tosfos says that if you look in the Gemara, you're going to see that this question is debated and discussed, and a conclusion is brought, which is that observance of mitzvos are greater than Torah study. Therefore, Tosfos' first answer should have been Tosfos' only answer. Once Tosfos said that we can look at the pasuk about lengthening of days and say it refers to the observance of mitzvot, why did Tosfos then feel the need to give a second answer that brought in the Torah study piece to the issue when Tosfos could have simply stayed with the first answer and rested on the fact that the Gemara in fact concludes that observance of mitzvos are greater than Torah study? Why did Tosfos bring in the second answer, feel the need to bring in a second answer, which gives validity to the approach of Talmud Torah being greater than observance of mitzvos, when that seems to be an idea that's not accepted by the Gemara? Next paragraph. V'yesh lomar shelefi teres harishon havemashma. We can say that according to the first answer in Tosfos, it would apply dechihu chayecha ma'irei dafka b'kiyam mitzvos v'lo b'Talmud Torah. According to the first answer, the pasuk about lengthening of days referred specifically and only to the observance of mitzvos and was not referring to the study of Torah. Shebelimud Torah ein bo chaim v'arichas yomim, and that would mean that the study of Torah doesn't bring with it long life and lengthening of days. Lochein tertzu. Tosfos didn't like that, wasn't comfortable with that, and therefore they brought the second answer, de'in hachinami, that we would concede according to the second answer in Tosfos, dechihu chayecha, that when it talks about your life, bein halimud, bein hakiyum mitzvos, ha-mitzvos, that's talking about the study of Torah, and also talking about the observance of mitzvos. Even though doing mitzvos is greater, nonetheless, even in study of Torah, you get the reward also of long life and lengthening of days. Mihu mitalmud Torah noshim pituros. Nonetheless, even though there is in fact, according to the second answer in Tosfos, there is in fact a connection between the blessing of long life and the study of Torah, women are not obligated in the study of Torah, mishum dechsiv behu miyuta, because, as Zera Shimshon mentioned before, quoting from Chazal, there is an exclusionary pasuk when it comes to women, and it teaches us that women do not have an obligation to study all areas of Torah outside of the mitzvos that they're going to be involved with, and that they need to know for a variety of reasons. Going to the next page, column on the right. V'hakodesh baruch hu be'esh shenosan Torah liYisrael. Hashem, at the time he gave the Torah to the Jewish people, now we're getting back to how we started in Parshas Yisro in the Medrash Rabbah piece, he wanted to make it known to the Jewish people that observance of mitzvos is greater than Torah study. And that's why he put the women first in the pasuk. To make it known to the Jewish people that the primary focus of Torah is the observance of mitzvos. It writes about the observance of mitzvos for sure. It's talking about the observance of mitzvos when it says this is your life and the lengthening of your days. Shaharei hanoshim peturos mitalmud Torah. Women are exempt from the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. V'afilu hachi kara osam, and nonetheless they are referred to first in the pasuk lefi shehein mizdarzeros b'mitzvos, because they're so committed and dedicated to do mitzvos quickly with alacrity. In Kain zehu ha'ikar, this shows us that it's the observance of mitzvos that is the main thing, and even more important than limud Torah, than the study of Torah. Next paragraph. Umasha Omer Mizdarzeros Techila. The fact that the Medrash Rabbah used this unusual wording where it said they show alacrity earlier than the men. Women don't just show alacrity to do mitzvos, they show it before the men show it. What does that mean? That was one of the questions in the beginning. Yesh Lomar, we can say, Shahabein ad sheyeh ben chomesh o sheish shanim. She says, let's refer to a child, a male child, until the male child is 5 or 6 years old. Eino bichlal chinuch b'shum mitzvah sheba'olam. The child is not included in the mitzvah for the parents to teach the child about mitzvos, about how to do mitzvos, to train the child how to do mitzvos. That the child is not included in that at all until he reaches the age of 5 or 6. In general, we don't have a need. Parents don't need to start teaching their sons about doing mitzvos until they're 5 or 6 years old, and they can start to understand the concept of doing certain mitzvos, and we can start to train them. V'kodem lazeh, before this, anu mechanchim oso b'talmud Torah. However, before the age of 5 or 6, we begin to take the very the earliest, most basic steps, preliminary steps in teaching the child Torah. Sheyakir ha'osios v'hanekudos. We want the child to begin to recognize the letters, Hebrew letters, and the vowels. Shechovazu mutelas aleinu. This obligation is placed upon us from the pasuk Vishinantam levanecha. You should teach your sons. However, l'nashim, when it comes to women, she'enu chayavus b'talmud Torah, who are exempt from the mitzvah of Torah study, kedidarshinon, as the Gemara and learns it out, levanecha v'lo livnosecha, teach Torah to your sons and not your daughters. Ein chova aleinu lasos kach. We don't have an obligation to start teaching Torah to girls, to young girls, the same way we do to the young boys. Ella kishetieno ma'at gedolos, when they get a little bigger, oz chove aleinu lechanchon b'mitzvos harauyos lahen. Then, in fact, we do have an obligation to start to train them in the mitzvos that are fitting and appropriate for them, that apply to them. Kumo hazechorim, just like the boys. Nimsa shehabonim mechanchen osam batorah techila. So we find that boys are trained first in recognizing letters and studying of Torah before the girls. V'habonos mechanchos osam techila b'mitzvos. And it's the girls who are taught about mitzvos first before the boys, meaning observance of other mitzvos besides Torah study. V'zehu lefi shehein mizdarzeros b'mitzvos techila. And that's what it meant when we say women show alacrity about mitzvos first, because they're taught about the observance of mitzvos before the boys are. Shahamase godol v'choshuv me'od lifnei hamakom, because it is the observance of mitzvos that is extremely important and great in front of Hashem, even more than the study of Torah. So the two massive pillars of Judaism, of course, are observance of mitzvos and Torah study, like we talk about all the time, the Torah and the mitzvos, the study of Torah and the observance of mitzvos. And the Zera Shimshon here delve deeply into this whole idea of Torah study and Limud HaTorah, and which is more important, which is greater, which one brings long life and the blessing of the lengthening of days, and which one applies to both men and women, and which one applies only in certain areas to men and not to women. So lots of different pieces to this question and issue that the Zera Shimshon explained to us and elucidated for us. Yasher koach for learning in the Zera Shimshon this week. We look forward, Be'ezus Hashem, to learning together in the Zera Shimshon on next week's Parsha.